reference, but then I couldn't find it. Okay, great. I want to do something with that. Because I'm like name checked in our EO to do something, and I don't know what the something is, but I'm hoping your report helps us understand that.
Brainstorm.
A very good morning to everyone. My name is Smriti George and I work with Natural Resources Defence Council India. It is my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the new Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization, the Energy and Resources Institute, and Natural Resources Defence Council. This side event will be discussing an important topic at this time and especially at this COP, sustainable cooling. I would now like to introduce you to our first speaker, Dr. Vibha Dhawan. Dr. Dhawan is the Director General of the Energy and Resources Institute in India. She is a fellow at the National Academy of Sciences in India and is also an adjunct professor at the Consul General South Asia Partnership at Michigan State University. I would now like to welcome Dr. Dhawan on stage to deliver the welcome address.
A very good morning to all of you, and I hope you all are surviving well in this COP. Too many people around, and I think that's also heating the environment, and it becomes all the more that cooling is required on this planet, and needless to say the importance of this particular workshop. On behalf of NRDC, NADO, and TERI, I welcome you all today as we convene under the distinguished umbrella of COP28 for the event Global Collaboration for Innovation in Sustainable Cooling, Solutions for Market Transformation. This gathering holds particular significance as we collectively embark on a journey towards reshaping the narrative around cooling technologies, emphasizing sustainability, innovation, and transformative market practices and the role of global collaboration in realizing it. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the critical role of accessible and sustainable cooling in addressing disparities related to human well-being, safety, and the provision of essential services such as healthcare, agriculture, and food supply. And I'm very glad that in this COP, particularly, we have started talking about food and sustainable food production, which I feel is a very important pillar of human survival on this planet. Cooling technologies, they play an important role in the ongoing battle against the pandemic, especially considering the significance of temperature-sensitive vaccines as a decisive measure to restore societal stability and economic functionality. Well, fortunately now we have overcome COVID, but then it's also said that this is not going to be the last pandemic. And the way, due to the changing climate, perhaps there are going to be new diseases, and maybe it will become a norm that you have to work day and night to develop vaccines for the new diseases and so on. And also, as the science is advancing, it becomes important that what you do doesn't remain confined to the metros, the healthcare, agriculture, perishability, everything has to reach the rural parts of the world as well. Whether it's in Africa, whether it's in other developing countries, we really have to be sensitive about it. The IPCC's recent report on climate change impacts on adaptation and vulnerability makes it clear that intensifying heat and humidity could be an increasing challenge for people to survive. As temperature rises globally, the demand for cooling solutions intensifies, particularly in vulnerable communities that bear the brunt of climate change. Intense heat waves, escalating droughts, and wildfire underscored the evident impact of the climate crisis. Sustainable cooling is not just an environmental necessity. It is a social imperative. The inequalities in assessing cooling technologies underscore the urgency of our shared mission to develop solutions that are not only efficient but also inclusive, reaching the farthest corner of our global community. As such, the implementation of sustainable cooling methods present an opportunity to combat rising temperatures while simultaneously reducing emissions. The sustainable cooling is of paramount importance as it directly impacts our environment, our health, and our global prosperity. Our discussions today will explore innovative strategies to drive market shifts towards eco-friendly and energy-efficient cooling solutions. The market, when harnessed effectively, becomes a powerful driver for change. It is imperative to ensure that cooling solutions are not only affordable, but are also sustainable and available to all those who need it. This commitment is crucial for poverty alleviation and attainment of global sustainable development goals and the effective mitigation of climate change and its associated impacts. Further, global collaboration is not a mere aspiration, but a necessity. The challenges posed by climate change recognizes no borders, and they demand a united front in pursuit of innovative solutions. The Kigali Cooling Efficient Program and United Nations Environment Program led cool coalitions as global initiatives, further exemplifying the power of collective action in addressing the pressing concerns of our time. This proactive backing is particularly encouraging for private sector entities to actively participate and become involved in these initiatives. The achievements of the Montreal Protocol and thereafter the subsequent Kigali Amendment underscore the effectiveness of international collaboration in environmental governance. These agreements, facilitated through coordinated efforts, have been instrumental in promoting global cooperation, facilitating the reduction of hazardous substances, and establishing a unified stance against climate change. Today, we all stand at the intersection of innovation and sustainability, and it is our collective responsibility to forge a path forward that aligns with our shared vision for a more resilient and sustainable future. The expeditious implementation of innovative solutions, coupled with well-defined business models and swift commercialization strategies, holds the key to achieving faster, more efficient, and sustainable access to cooling for diverse populations. I'm sure deliberations at this event will help us identify strategies and opportunities for working towards finding innovative solutions to the challenges and need of cooling that are cost-effective, timely, and equitable. Let's face it, we have no other place to go. It's only one planet where we have to live. It's also that the way the technology is developing, what you develop today is not going to be the technology 5 years back. So therefore, there is very little time in developing a technology and commercializing it and benefiting people. And we all have to take everyone along with us, because unrest in any part of the world, or if you can't see people dying because of the heat or not having or leaving a region undeveloped, largely because they are not able even to save their food grains because they have no cool chambers. So let's move towards a planet, an equitable planet, and ensure that everyone have access. We innovate, develop technologies in partnerships, and we take those technologies to those for whom you have developed those technology in very little time, and then proceed further developing new technologies. So with these words, I'd like to welcome you once again, and I'm sure you are going to have very good discussion today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Dhawan. We now move to our first session that will be moderated by Mr. Manish Bapna, President and CEO at NRDC. Mr. Bapna has held leadership roles across the world and is focused on designing sustainable development strategies that are equitable, durable, and scalable. Having worked in China, India, and Brazil, and other parts of Asia and Latin America, Mr. Bapna brings a global presence on scaling solutions at the intersection of the environment and human development. Over to you, Mr. Bapna.
Thank you. Really delighted to be here. And Viva, thank you. That was a great opening as to why this conversation is just so critically important at this moment in time. I just want to pick up a couple of points, just building on what you said, why this matters. Everyone understands the challenge of extreme heat. What really struck me just in the last week was the WMO latest analysis that warming in 2023 is 1.4 centigrade. 1.4, not 1.2, not 1.3, 1.4 degrees above pre-industrial levels, right? Despite all of the ambition we're seeing, the actual response in terms of temperature is on the most pessimistic projections. And we know what that means, right? 3.5 billion people around the world that are particularly vulnerable to extreme heat. Only 15% of them have active solutions for cooling. 350,000 people already died in 2019, according to a Lancet study. When we look at just the elderly from extreme heat, and that number is projected to increase by an order of magnitude. So we know this is a serious issue for all the reasons that you said. And we also know that cooling, the other number that really kind of came as a little bit of a surprise to me, 7% of global emissions connected to cooling in one way or another. And when you look at emissions from refrigerant and energy use to 2050, emissions under business as usual is going to triple. So the motivation for making movement on cooling cannot be more apparent. And when we had this event a year ago, cooling was barely on the global agenda. There's kind of work in different pockets, but not really kind of where it needs to be. And what we've seen actually in the past 12 months is real momentum on cooling, on the ground, in terms of policy, in terms of global conversations. Where we are today is in a very different place than where we are 12 months ago. We're going to need to do that again and again and again. But what we want to do in today's session is really to profile and highlight what's happening around the world on cooling. The first panel, we were going to look a little bit more at policy, at partnerships, what's happening in the United States, in India, in Japan, kind of globally, in terms of cooling, in terms of policy, in terms of innovation, in terms of partnerships. And then the second panel is going to get a lot more granular on specific solutions, specific technological innovations that we think are worth sharing with all of you. We have a great panel here to do that. I'm going to turn to each of them and say they all are incredibly distinguished, but I'm going to give you only one line in terms of who they are and a quick question to help set up what they're going to say. And I'm going to start with Ali Zaidi, who is the National Climate Advisor in the United States, the chief climate person for President Biden, for the administration. And the United States has done a lot on cooling. And so Ali, it'd be great if you could say a little bit more about what is the U.S. doing and what might there be in terms of lessons and support as we think a little bit more about what needs to happen globally in terms of cooling. Ali.
Thanks so much, and it's fantastic to be here with other colleagues from the U.S. government, from our national labs present here in the audience. A few different ways that we're thinking about this challenge and this opportunity, but before I go in and sort of walk through them individually, I'll give you just something that was surprising to me, maybe taking from Manish's lead, things that surprise us when we stare at the data. In the United States, we have this program that's existed for a number of years called the Low Income Heating Assistance Program, LIHEAP. And for a number of years, that program has provided aid to low-income Americans to provide relief from the increasing costs of heat during winter months. So, being someone who formerly worked in a budget office and now is the climate advisor of the president, I thought, gee, maybe we're going to save money on LIHEAP because of global warming. Perverse thing, but would be good to know. And it turned out, as we ran the numbers for the United States, that we will actually spend more on LIHEAP at the end of this decade and the next. And that's kind of confusing because of the title of the program, but what's embedded underneath the title of the program is we also help people out with cooling costs. But it's just been a minuscule part of that budget in the LIHEAP program. And what we found in the math was, although heating costs were going down, cooling costs were actually rising at a faster clip. And the reason I tell you this is not so you learn more about the LIHEAP program, but more so that you can think about how the system is bouncing around. When we talk about increasing access to cooling, that in and of itself being a very clear and unambiguous imperative, it's also important for us to think about the second order and third order effects of that. Who's going to pay for the cooling? What's that going to do to family budgets and national budgets? Is there going to be disparity in who can afford the cooling costs? How are we going to defray that? How is that going to be distributed and shared as a burden we all carry? That's question number one. Question number two is, as we maybe make it more affordable, right? Maybe you all create a program like LIHEAP to make it easy to afford and access cooling. Well then, have we put new strain on our electricity grid? What's going to be running to meet the demand, especially in what will be peaky demand in a summer? So the power plants that maybe didn't run most of the year are now peaking. And are those plants clean? Probably not. Our experience in the United States is the stuff that runs to meet that summer demand is usually the dirtiest stuff we've got on the system. So even as we have this conversation that feels like a already complex and hard question, right? How do you meet the numbers Manish laid out? I think it's so important for us to think through the second order and the third order. And that brings us to the approach as a country that we're taking, one that I think has a lot of opportunity for synergy with folks all around the world. The first is a focus on the emissions themselves. We signed on to Kigali, and to the surprise of probably everybody, including ourselves, we were able to ratify an environmental treaty in the United States of America and got the Kigali Amendment through the United States Senate last year after we passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Huge progress. And now we've got the receipts, the rules in place to lead to those substitutes being developed and a phase out of the bad stuff, which folks should take note, phase outs can work. That's thing number one, right, is the focus on the emissions. The other part of that emissions quandary that we're struggling through, and I think have a less clear answer to, is how do we build the grid capacity to meet this demand without adding to the challenges of the emissions we already have from the power sector. Working through it, not solved, but something that's on our radar. The second is this conversation about efficiency. And I'm sitting next to David Sandalow, so I've got to talk about energy efficiency. But we cannot, for economic reasons and otherwise, deploy yesterday's cooling, even if we solve for the HSC problem, into the stock that we hope to expand access to cooling for. We can't afford it from a dollars and cents perspective, that inefficiency, and see previous comment on power grid effects. If we're deploying yesterday's efficiency on tomorrow's solutions, we're just not going to be able to get the math to work. So that's why one of our big focus areas through the labs is to drive up the efficiency and drive down the dollar consumption per unit. And I think that's going to accrue from a global perspective to the benefit of everybody. The third, and I've only got 4, so then I'll stop. The third is this question of equity. How do we make sure that the access to cooling technology is broad and is particularly focused on the most vulnerable? In the United States, some of our most vulnerable folks live in the least likely to retrofit and upgrade parts of the economy. Maybe they live in public buildings, public housing. In certain cases, they live in homes that are governed by fixed income, senior citizens who don't have the free cash flow to retrofit. And some are absorbing this risk vector through their employers. I just give you an example, and I hate to air dirty laundry at a United Nations conference, but I have to do it because I think it shows you that everybody's not on the same page. So in Texas, that's a really big state in the United States, the governor has signed legislation that prevents employers from being responsible for water breaks and giving access to cooling for their workers. So there is a little bit of a tension in even this effort to boost the equity, and it's because somebody's got to pay for that equity. We've got to step up collectively and finance that. So I identify it as an issue not solved by any measure, but we've got to recognize, we've got to be absolutely clear-eyed. This is going to require differentiated solutions and different types of capital to attack the problem. The last one, which is sort of outside the remit of this conversation, one which we're enthusiastically supportive of, is to assess the environmental context in which all of this operates. In the United States, for decades, long ago, we had a racist housing policy. That meant folks who looked a certain way lived in certain neighborhoods, others lived in other places. The people who were in these so-called red-lined communities have more pavement and fewer trees. That means the ambient air temperature, the way they feel the 1.4 degrees, is just a lot worse than how it's felt elsewhere. And I know this for a fact, that's not just true in the United States of America. All around the world, lower income people live in lower lying areas. They're more vulnerable to flood. They live in the places that are paved over. They're more likely to heat up during the summer months. So that context also matters. And even as we tackle the mechanical part of this question, right? And that is something we absolutely must do. We have to keep thinking at that broader scale. Tree coverage, equity around access to nature, building smart when we build out. As urbanization continues to be a trend in the African continent and elsewhere, we have to be smarter going forward than we were in the past. So that's how we think about it in the United States. Emissions, whether it's non-CO2 or CO2. Efficiency, making sure this is cheaper and runs with less power going into the system. Equity, being really clear-eyed about the fact that this falls in disproportionate ways on different people in our communities all around the world. And finally, even as we focus on the mechanical, thinking about those environmental context points. We've got to be looking at the whole picture if we're going to solve the entire problem. Thanks, Manish.
Thank you. That was terrific. Well done. Stay for as long as you can,
Yes,
but
but I might have to
I
duck
know
out.
you may
Yes.
need to duck out relatively soon. But thank you, and we were also we had a very good story about what India is doing on cooling with their India Cooling Action Plan. Unfortunately, the Indian delegation is in the middle of negotiations, and the people that were speaking here were the negotiators. So we unfortunately do not have them with us at the moment. So let me turn, we're delighted to have Shinichi Kihara, who is the Director General for International Policy on Carbon Neutrality at the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. And he's going to talk a little bit more about the green transformation policy in Japan, how we look at that in terms of emissions and economic growth, how is Japan thinking about innovation policy that helps support innovation in this space. Delighted to have you with us. Okay. Yeah.
So good afternoon, everyone. While I wait for the slides to pull up, I really thank TERI and NRDC and NEDO for hosting this very timely event. And I really thank they giving me the opportunity to join this event. I'm Shinichi Kihara, the Director General for International Policy on Carbon Neutrality, representing METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. And I'm very happy to introduce a very quick introduction on Japan's green transformation strategy, and also talk a little bit about the cooling policy. So green transformation, we read it short GX. GX is now everywhere in Japanese policy, also Japanese business, everywhere. Let me start from the three drivers of the GX policy. So first is we aim for triple breakthrough. People sometimes call it trilemma, but we call it breakthrough. We're going to meet triple goals of economic growth, energy security, and decarbonization, and we will not sacrifice one for the other. Second is one goal, various pathways. You can see the mountain here. For everybody, the goal is climate neutrality, but the path is different according to different countries, different industries. There are hard to abate people, but there are also relatively quicker business. So, and thirdly, a solution to the world. Japan accounts for 3% of global CO2 emission. So we will decarbonize that 3%, of course, but we will care the 97% emission. Japan will contribute to the reduction of the emission of that 97%, utilizing our technology, finance, and also the capacity building capacity. We announced this 2050 carbon neutral target in 2020, and we have released three major policy packages starting from the far end, the 2050, and coming closer. And this is a challenge of far future strategy to near realism strategy, kind of. So you can see green growth strategy aiming for 2050 carbon neutral target. We identify innovation on 14 priority fields and area. We put up a big green innovation fund of 2 trillion yen to support that innovation. The second package is the strategic energy plan, which shows the 2030 target of 46% reduction, GHG reduction by 2030. Here we focused on the supply side, energy supply side. So we issued the detailed energy mix, power generation mix. But now what we are working today is this green transformation strategy of 2023. The relevant bill has passed the Diet session this May. The GX is a comprehensive whole of economy policy package that outlines path forward in demand side, including the hard to abate industries. And you can see in this green transformation strategy, pro-growth carbon pricing concept is a big keyword in this GX strategy. So we estimate 150 trillion yen, 1.1 trillion US dollar, of public plus private GX investment is needed over the next 10 years to accelerate R&D and scaling up technology implementation. So to make this happen, we have this big pro-growth carbon pricing policy package. In other words, this is a big carrot, a big stick policy. You can see the carrot on the left and the stick on the right. So first, the carrot side comes. So the government will support upfront investment by issuing GX economic transition bonds amounting 20 trillion or 140 billion US dollars over the next 10 years. So this is the first transition bond issued by a government. We see green bonds issued by the government, but there's no government that issues transition bond that helps push the hard-to-abate sectors to make their transition. And for this government transition bond, we recently released the framework document, and there's a second-party opinion certifies these framework, and this is just announced very recently. So that's how we will make this big money of 20 trillion yen, and we will allocate this to the important sectors. Then the big stick comes later. We will introduce the carbon pricing with hybrid of emission trading system starting 2026, and also GX surcharge on fossil fuel supply starting on 2028. This GX surcharge is essentially a carbon tax. So you can see the big carrot comes first, and big stick comes later. The message from the government behind this big carrot and big stick policy is move fast and transform. Then the companies can receive the support, become low carbon and competitive, and avoid additional burden coming later when the stick comes in. And it is the role of the government to present the overall vision and policy timelines upfront to enhance predictability and enhance industries build strategies and make hard decisions. So this is kind of combination of the big carrot. I can see the US IRA is a huge carrot policy, and EU emissions trading system is kind of big stick mechanism. So we combine those two together. And from next February, the government will issue the Japanese climate transition bond as the first sovereign transition bond. And this is aimed to boost the R&D and implementation of decarbonization technology and call in private investment needed to fulfill the 150 trillion yen goal. And for the GX promotion strategy, the bond will prioritize to invest in the sectors that are difficult for the private sector alone to make investment decisions, and also contribute to emission reduction while enhancing industrial competitiveness and achieving economic growth as a use of proceeds. So example of areas that we will highlight is manufacturing, transportation, CCS, energy saving, renewable energy, nuclear, hydrogen, ammonia, electricity, gas market. So it's essentially almost all sector we will try to facilitate. So you can see the bonds cover the wide scope of technology that are needed to drive forward Japan's decarbonization on all fronts, including power, transportation, and industry sector. And Japan has made continuous effort in the area of climate-friendly cooling. The oil shock of the 1970s prompted Japan to advance greater efficiency and energy-consuming equipment through both regulatory and supportive measures. Energy efficiency of air conditioners in Japan has improved by 30% through the Top Runner program in the past 20 years. This Top Runner program is a moving target standard, so it sets the energy performance target for energy-consuming equipment at the level of the high-end quality of that time. It requires the manufacturer and importers to achieve them, and when they achieve them, the standard is higher. So you have to be always competitive and innovative. In addition, we introduced the evaluated methodology according to the real use mode. So we're talking about the heat pump with inverters. Heat pump is efficient, but with inverter is super efficient. But you need a right standard to facilitate those manufacturers to produce heat pump with inverters. So the standard in Japan is to really measure in the real use mode. Not only the 100%, 0% mode, it does measure sometimes it's 30% use. So the standard has to be according to the real mode. And Japanese heat pump manufacturers produce and supply products worldwide and accounting for 40% of global production capacity today. And we will contribute to the promotion of high energy efficient cooling in the world. Addition to policy measures, one concept that I would like to introduce today is this avoided emission concept. In order to encourage companies to promote such higher energy efficient cooling equipment, Japan is promoting and disseminating the disclosure of a new concept, avoided emission, to encourage positive climate actions. Avoided emission is a methodology that evaluates companies' contribution to the society-wide CO2 reduction through the spread of green products and services. So, for example, this heat pump air conditioner manufacturer, they are very popular in European market. They are replacing gas heating. But according to the existing Scope 1, 2, 3 accounting system, the more heat pump manufacturer produce, their Scope 1 to 3 just goes up. It's hard to capture that real reduction happening worldwide. So this new concept of avoided emission is now quickly catching up, and there's a WBCSD has now issued their guidance, the first guidance, and IEC is working on their international standard on the real calculation of measuring these avoided emission by specific products. And already Siemens and also Panasonic, they are disclosing their avoided emission in their annual report. So in summary, our challenge to carbon neutrality is a whole of economy challenge, and government of Japan will accomplish its mission by activating the GX strategy, including pro-growth carbon price concept, issuing giant 20 trillion yen Japan climate transition bond. And on the efficient cooling, Japan will continue leading the technology and provide solutions to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, both for sharing kind of the story of how Japan is looking to tackle climate, but then how also the approach around cooling and innovation and the way in which you're looking at policy, at competition, at standards and ways to actually move that forward, and how in particular to bring industry on board with the pace of innovation that we need to see. So delighted to see that. I'd like now to turn to David Sandalow, who is the inaugural fellow at the Columbia Global Energy Policy Center. Previously spent quite a bit of time at the United States Department of Energy, and as you noted, as Ali noted, one of the world's leading efficiency and innovation experts. David.
Manish, thank you. It's great to be here, and especially great to be at an event hosted by TERI, NRDC, and NATO. Those three organizations have several things in common. First, each one has an acronym with 4 letters in it. But there's something even more important that they share, which is that each one is making extraordinary contributions to the protection of the global environment and to fighting climate change. And it's an honor for me to be on a stage at an event with leaders from those organizations and organized by these three. So thank you very much for inviting me. I've been asked today to give a briefing on a report that we just released, sponsored by NATO, and I want to thank NATO for the support for this report. And it's on the very hot topic of artificial intelligence. November 30th, 1922, ChatGPT was released. Exactly 1 year later, this conference started. In the year since ChatGPT released, AI has become an extraordinarily prominent topic of conversation, and for good reason, because it's a transformational technology that can do many things. And so we, over the past 9 months, put together a team to answer the question, how can AI help reduce emissions of greenhouse gases? We found a number of different answers, which I'll talk about. I'll say we didn't, in this process, look at a couple of other questions which were important. We didn't look at how AI can help adapt to climate change. There's a lot AI can do in adaptation. That's a different topic. We also didn't look at the topic of, on balance, is this going to be good or bad? Because AI's got a lot of risks associated with it, as well as potential benefits. Our report, which is 130 pages long, it's a lot of detail, focuses on how can AI help reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. And here's our table of contents, and this is now publicly available on the ICEF website. If you Google artificial intelligence and ICEF, you'll find it. And we start with an introduction to AI and an introduction to climate change. And this report is intended to be both for experts and non-experts. And one of our basic insights in doing this research, indeed, we found this within our own team of a dozen researchers, is there's a community of people that know a lot about climate change, and there's a community of people that know a lot about artificial intelligence. And we need more people who know something about both topics. And we need people who are climate change experts and more about AI, and AI experts know more about climate change. I think this is starting to happen. Then we looked at 6 high potential opportunities. There are more of them, but you can see what we did. And I'm going to talk about 3 of them quickly, and then some cross-cutting topics. Now, I selected for this very short talk, I'm going to talk for a few minutes, 3 topics that I think have relevance to cooling, potentially, in the main topic of this panel. And the first is on greenhouse gas emissions monitoring. And the basic message of our chapter on this topic is that we're in a new world when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions monitoring. Historically, monitoring has been done based upon voluntary reporting and based upon fossil fuel emissions data largely. But we are getting to the point right now where we have enough satellite data, sensor data, drone data, that we can actually, using machine learning tools, we can actually start to have real-time monitoring of methane emissions, of carbon dioxide emissions, and potentially other greenhouse gases. This is, I think, going to change a lot of policy development. In fact, we're already seeing it with methane. One of the reasons that we are able to have ambitious methane pledges is that the world has learned a lot more about methane emissions in the past 5 years than it knew 5 years ago. And that's largely the result of increased data, but then increased machine learning to evaluate that data. And for those of you who aren't familiar with machine learning, one thing it does extremely well is find patterns. Okay, I mean, I started this talk with a very simple pattern. The organizations that are sponsoring this event each have 4 letters in their name. Okay, that's a very basic pattern. Machine learning can identify extraordinary patterns vastly beyond the ability of human beings to identify. And that becomes extremely important when you have enormous amounts of data, such as are coming off of these satellites doing greenhouse gas emissions monitoring. And I think we're going to find this is helpful, for example, with finding illegal production and releases of CFCs and HFCs, HFC emissions in the cooling area. An expert told me recently that in her view, it is impossible to manage a decentralized, decarbonized electric grid without machine learning tools. Already we're seeing machine learning is being used to produce solar power and wind power more efficiently because machine learning tools can predict when the sun's going to shine, when the wind's going to blow. It can predict electric loads in particular. And definitely when we're managing efficient cooling, artificial intelligence machine learning tools are going to play a role. And this, I think, is potentially the most interesting and the most exciting application of artificial intelligence in this area. And that's accelerating the process of materials innovation. When Thomas Edison invented the modern light bulb 150 years ago, he physically took different types of carbon filaments and different materials, ran electricity charges through them to figure out what would happen. Today, artificial intelligence tools can simulate 1 million tests like that in a second. And that type of rapid analysis offers tremendous potential for accelerating innovation in a wide range of areas, absolutely in the cooling area as well. So just important to look then at what are the barriers. Like, what is it that's preventing us from using artificial intelligence to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including in the cooling area? We identified 5 barriers, which are here: data, people, computation, cost, and institutions. In our view, the most important are data and people. Artificial intelligence is a really useful tool when you have large amounts of data. Where you don't have big data sets, you can't really use AI. So producing high-quality, standardized data is important. And then trained personnel is absolutely central as well. I've already spoken a little bit about that, but we need rapid learning curve on AI in many different segments of the population. There are absolutely risks when it comes to AI, and it's central to consider these. Bias is an important one. There's kind of a famous instance of artificial intelligence hiring tools discriminating against female applicants because it was looking at all the successful applicants in the past, more of whom had been male than female. So it incorporated that bias. And we need to make sure that the AI tools that we use don't perpetuate historic biases. There's issues with security, privacy, increased greenhouse gas emissions. My research indicates that right now AI is producing a very, very small amount of greenhouse gases in the world. There's a Nature study that says data centers overall are producing about 0.1 to 0.2% of the greenhouse gases in the world today, and about 25% of that may relate to AI. But in the future, as AI increases exponentially, that could increase a lot. However, as AI use increases exponentially, the efficiency of the hardware is going to improve, and the efficiency of the software is going to improve as well. And then the hyperscalers, the large data center operators who manage this, including Google and Meta and Facebook, are some of the world's largest purchasers of clean energy. So just because AI is increasing exponentially doesn't necessarily mean greenhouse gases are going to increase enormously. There's a lot of uncertainty in this area. And then we have 12 finding recommendations. We're short on time, so I won't read all of them, but really the headline, I think, is the first one, that AI tools should be integrated into many aspects of climate mitigation. And any organization that has a role in climate mitigation, I recommend, have an advisor to the CEO on AI issues or an AI office, depending on its size, but should start to look at how to use this tool in climate change mitigation. And with that, I just want to thank again the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry and NIDO for its support of the ICEF roadmap project. This is actually the 12th roadmap we've done in about 8 years with a number of other topics. If you're interested in these topics, please go to the ICEF roadmap. Thanks again.
Thank you, David. Just such a kind of fresh, important new perspective and a kind of a really interesting question about how will AI help inform or shape how we think about cooling over the next 5 to 10 years. Will be a very interesting set of questions to explore. So look, we are a little behind schedule, but really kind of really important context-setting remarks in terms of lessons learned from the U.S. experience in cooling, to looking at some of the policy choices that Japan is making to promote innovation and industry kind of engagement, to thinking really about technological innovation, kind of AI, new ideas, and how they can inform our ability to really scale up cooling solutions at the pace that we need to see. So that is what we wanted to do in this first panel, and now we're going to transition to the second panel, where we're going to get quite a bit more granular on specific cooling solutions and how we can take them to scale. So with that, let me turn it over to Prima Madan, let me turn it back to my colleagues. Thank you. And a warm round of applause to the speakers. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all our distinguished speakers again for joining us, and Mr. Bapna for having moderated the first session. We now move to the second session that will be moderated by Mr. R. Rashmi. I request all the panelists to join us on stage. Mr. Rashmi is a retired officer of the Indian Administrative Service and is an expert on climate change-related policy, strategy, actions, and international negotiations. He has been involved with the formulation and implementation of public policies on environment, commerce, and finance at the central and state level in India. I now invite Mr. Rashmi to take over the second session.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you are settled, we'll begin our session. We have an extremely brilliant panel with us here to discuss the examples of innovations in sustainable coaling. We have just heard what the governments, the stakeholders are doing in terms of developing a framework for addressing this problem. We will go into the technology solutions now and innovations. Before we begin our discussion, I'll like to request Ms. Jaya Singh, the India representative of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, who have partnered with us in preparing this brief on India climate change and health systems response for releasing this document. And maybe all of us can join this in releasing this document. You have a copy here, sir? Yes.
Just a small correction. I'm working with the Indo-Pacific region.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
And would like to thank TERI for this evidence on climate change and health in 8 countries in the Indo-Pacific.
So just to introduce the work, it's focusing on the Indo-Pacific region. It's trying to look at climate and health linkages, and it covers a deep dives into 7 countries within the Indo-Pacific region to look at both climate health linkages as well as health response systems within those countries to be able to respond to the risks related to climate change. And heat is one of them that has been covered under them. Thank you so much. If you could please open the ribbon and do the honors for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I won't introduce the subject in detail. I think we have heard already the panelists in the first session who have outlined the problem and the ways in which we need to handle this. So we have, of course, a slight constraint in terms of time because we have to cut short our session by 20 minutes. So I'll request the panelists to be economical with their thoughts and ideas when they introduce the subject. First, let me invite Mr. Michihiro Kishimoto, the Environment Strategy Director of the Environment Strategy Business Division of Hitachi. Mr. Kishimoto, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to these wonderful sessions. My name is Michihiro Kishimoto from Hitachi. I'm working for the Global Environment Business Group to develop the green businesses at Hitachi. I'd like to explain our air conditioning solutions and approach toward the carbon neutral society. I'd like to explain our air conditioning IoT solution, Exceeda. As mentioned in this slide, I'd like to stress this solution is aimed to address whole issues related to air conditioning by integrating our IT, OT, and products. First, this solution does not just focus on providing energy-efficient product. It places more emphasis on providing comfortable air services. In environmental perspectives, it increases efficient use of energy and also helps prevent refrigerant leaks. Second, this does not just pursue environmental improvement, but also emphasize increasing the comfort of the people who is living in the building and who is managing buildings. Pursuing these values at the same time will result in its sustainability. Third, the importance of latest digital technology. Remote monitoring enables us to monitor the status of the equipment 24/7 from a location away from the site. And predictive diagnostics enables us to analyze the data and notify when irregular signs are detected in a timely manner. Both helps decrease greenhouse gas emissions. Next, this explains our approach towards net zero energy building. At Hitachi, we call the basic concept of our digital solution Lumada. This is a word that means creating value by shining a light on our customers' data. Also, it is a cyclical process of understanding customers' pain points, extracting solutions to the issue with our IT, OT, and products, implementing these solutions, and proceeding to the next issue through maintenance and operation. We apply this Lumada cycle approach to our ZEB solutions. It means we measure and visualize building energy data obtained from integrated building management solution and analyze that data using AI technology to formulate an optimal plan and implementing that plan with the systems composed of inverter control, insulation, heat pumps, waste heat utilization, etc. Even after those installations, we will continue to improve energy efficiency by our energy management system. Through this cycle, we will continue to promote ZEB. We used to focusing on energy efficiency of our equipment, but we put more value on operational management. The focus here is not to sell better products, but to provide better services. Hitachi will contribute to achieve carbon neutrality through our IT, OT, and products technologies. Thank you for your attention.
That was indeed very focused, Mr. Kishimoto. Thank you very much for introducing the kind of integrated solution that Hitachi is experimenting in the area of air conditioning. Let me now invite Mr. Noah Horowitz. Mr. Horowitz is, he is currently the program director of the Clean Cooling Collaborative, and he has history of being a part of the development of the regulations with the UNEP for air conditioners and refrigeration equipment. I am sure his knowledge and experience will help us understand these technological solutions very well. Mr. Horowitz.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. And just full disclosure, I used to work at NRDC, so I still have a soft spot for the great work you and everybody is doing here. I know we're short on time. Just very briefly, I work with the Clean Cooling Collaborative. It's a program within ClimateWorks Foundation, and we aim for cooling to be energy efficient, have climate-friendly refrigerants, and for the cooling to be accessible to all that need it. We work both on refrigeration and space cooling, and I want to cut to the chase. There are going to be 3 billion, B as in boy, billion, more air conditioners installed in the world, according to IEA, by 2050. So as Ali mentioned earlier, what does that mean? We're going to have a lot of stress on the grid. We're going to have a lot more carbon emissions and other pollutants, and that might cause a lot of blackouts. And the worst combination is a lot of extreme heat waves. The dirty peaker plants are running, and we have got choices. We can invest overly so in battery storage to keep those running when people come home at night and the sun isn't shining. Also, if we have power outages when it's really hot, that's when people are going to die. So we need to avoid that and work together. A lot of those air conditioners are going to go to those parts of the world that have both high temperature and high humidity. A lot of those are in the global south, in particular in India and Southeast Asia. Also, if we get this wrong, That air conditioner is going to continue to cause extra electricity and pollution and higher utility bills for 10 plus years. We can't afford to lock those inefficient units. We need to act now before that curve takes off. So the good news, there was a thing called the Global Cooling Prize, GCP, and that's the first acronym I used, and I'll try and be mindful of that. It was a combined effort of RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute, the Indian government, CEPT University in India, and many others who are in the room. And the idea was, can we have an air conditioner that is 5 times lower climate impact than today's conventional air conditioner? So how would that be done? Dramatic increase in efficiency, and it would do a much better job at pulling the moisture out of the air, which many of today's air conditioners use a lot more energy than needed to for the dehumidification. And it would use a much more climate-friendly refrigerant. It would have lower global warming potential. That prize was an enormous success. 2 of the world's largest air conditioner manufacturers produced a prototype that met that unforeseen level of performance. The bad news is you can't buy one today. So the challenge for all of us is how do we help drive the commercialization and the sales of those units? This would be a really big deal. So we're on that trajectory for all these more air conditioners. If we get this right, we can save just under 70 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That's more than 1 year's worth of global GHG emissions. Also, people's bills will be lower. Some people might be able to afford the air conditioner, and hopefully they buy the good one, but they need to be able to afford to operate it as well. So what needs to be done, and I'll be fast here. First of all, my comments now will be focused on India, and we want to help India move forward in implementing its ICAP, the India Cooling Action Plan. So a lot of our efforts are meant to support those activities, and we want to be helpful as philanthropy. So to make it really simple, we need the manufacturers to make it. We need the initial buyers lined up to buy them once they're available, and then over time, price will come down with economies of scale. So first, we need to fix the test method. How do you measure the energy use and performance of an air conditioner today? The testing is done at full load, not at the lower loads that inverters tend to run. And the testing, believe it or not, isn't done at the high humidity conditions that many of these air conditioners are operated in. We need industry to step up with the trade associations, help from government and other entities to do the design work needed to actually be able to bring these units to the market. And that may require some technical assistance. The secret sauce is the controls that make the hardware do their job properly. Then we need to test these new units in the lab to confirm that the testing is actually right, that it reflects how it will work in people's homes. And then we need to test them in the field. These are brand new units. It's somewhat off-the-shelf technology, but it's all packaged differently. We need to make sure these don't leak, they don't hum, any unintended consequences. Let's find out now. And more importantly, how much energy do they save? So we can have real data on the payback period so we can help start this whole engine. We're going to need financial mechanisms to help bring these to the market. There might be funds needed to convert the factories and build them out. We need bulk procurement. So who buys these in bulk? Government agencies and leading corporates can really play a key role here. We need incentives to buy down the initial cost, especially at the beginning, to jumpstart sales. And we need a whole communication strategy. We need to have a drumbeat going. The world needs a better air conditioner. Here's a solution. Let's make it happen. Very quickly, I want to turn to ceiling fans. Many people aren't going to be able to afford an air conditioner, or a ceiling fan might be completely sufficient. There are 500 million ceiling fans in place in India today, and that number is only going to rise. And that might be the only piece of cooling equipment that family will have. The good news, unlike with the air conditioners, the better fan exists today. They're called brushless DC, BLDC fans. They cut energy use by 50%. They're available on the market. They have low market share. We need together to help figure out how to grow that. And the energy service company in India, EESL, has committed to deploy 10 million of these super efficient fans just this year in 2024. So the challenge is, how do we scale those learnings and bring down the cost so these better fans can be more affordable to all? So I want to stop there, and I hope everybody can join us in this journey. And it's critically important. I spoke about the technology solutions, but I want to leave you with the thought that cooling is no longer a luxury. It's a human right and a necessity, and we need to figure this out together. Thank you. I also have a one-pager that I can provide to you electronically, or if you'd like a paper version, please stop by.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz. Thank you for your suggestions. I have noted that you referred in particular to the need to improve the energy performance standards and fix those standards for the air conditioners, and similarly for super efficient fans. But you also said that we need an ecosystem for promoting this, for manufacturing these super efficient equipment, and financing is obviously a very important element of that. So let me now turn to Abhas Jha, who is the practice manager at the World Bank, and he looks after the South Asia region, works on policy reform and development finance issues in the jurisdiction under his charge. So Abhas, the question before you is, how do you provide the required kind of financial support to the kind of technological solutions that we are talking about?
So thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this panel. So I'm going to actually pick up from where Noah left off. And so first of all, many of you may have seen the World Energy Outlook report that came out from the IEA about a week ago. And that had an interesting data point which caught my eye. It says that if India continues on its current trajectory, the energy demand for air conditioning alone from India will exceed that of Africa's entire energy consumption. And essentially from today till 2050, the energy consumption from India for air conditioning alone is going to multiply 9 times. Now that's a scary prospect. That's number one. The second data point I want to share with you is that earlier this year in Pakistan, in a place called Jacobabad, the temperature hit 52 degrees centigrade. That is a temperature where human beings can no longer survive. Now, if you look at, say, research coming out of MIT about a few years ago from Professor Al-Tahir and others, they say that even in the most optimistic climate scenario, the number of hot days in South Asia is going to triple. So this is a new normal that we need to be cognizant of and take into account. Now, the thing about this discussion about cooling is that we tend to default to air conditioning. But we have to recognize that the huge, overwhelming majority of people will never afford air conditioning in the countries that I work in, at least, in South Asia. So we need to start thinking about other alternatives. And I'll come to air conditioning in a minute, but just to turn to, for example, you mentioned ceiling fans. That is a hugely important part of it. But also building materials. We need to start thinking about beyond concrete and steel and glass. But the problem is that when you talk to builders, they don't do concrete because they love concrete. They do it because it's the cheapest and the most durable form of building material available. If you start talking to them about alternatives, they'll say, well, concrete is a 100-year-old technology. You try out whatever you want and come back to us in 100 years, and we'll talk to you then. So it's not going to be easy to change the mind shift. If you even talk to poor people in South Asia, a brick and mortar house is like a status symbol. Even if it's unlivable, they still want it because it's a sign of moving upwards. So how you change this mindset and how do you sort of incentivize better, cheaper, durable material that is also has thermal comfort inside is a really big challenge. Some of the solutions that I would suggest is that we need much more investment in R&D, possibly by the government. But we also need to start measuring this problem better. So, for example, the government of India has a huge housing program, both rural and urban, which is totally focused only on volume. They don't care if the house is livable or not livable. They just want to pump out as much volume as they can. Now we need to start putting, for example, thermal sensors, which cost like $1 or less, inside these homes to start measuring the ambient temperature inside. So those are the kind of solutions we need to start thinking about. That's point number one. Point number two is on air conditioning. Now, air conditioning is, again, another about 100-year-old technology, which has barely changed. So if you look at the air conditioning technology of 100 years ago and today, there's not much difference. And it's a very inefficient technology, because essentially what it does is it takes the air and it first cools down the temperature, uses a huge amount of energy, and then it heats it up and then cools it down again to take the moisture out. And those processes are, pretty much separate. But as Noah mentioned, there is a lot of interesting research going on, but it will take some time to get it to scale and wider acceptability. Now, last point I want to make is about financing, and which is that I'm an economist, so I always think about the joke about the economist who saw a $10 bill on the sidewalk and he refused to pick it up because he said somebody else would have picked it up. So an economist always thinks about incentives and sort of. So when I look at the cooling market, I always think about these dollar bills. That the fact that the private sector is not coming in means that there are some obstructions and risks that we need to kind of unpack in order to get them in. So to that end, I would suggest that public procurement has a big role to play. You mentioned bulk procurement of air conditioners. As you're probably well aware, TERI had actually done a study on bulk procurement of air conditioners. It did not work out very well. India has had spectacular success on the LED bulb side, but on air conditioners, it did not work at all. So we need to figure out how to make that kind of program work. Sorry? But we also need to think about things like, for example, partial risk guarantees to incentivize the private sector to come into some of these newer areas. So let me stop here, and thank you very much again.
Thank you, Abbas. So as far as the financing is concerned, your thoughts are very clear. I mean, the problem is very similar to when we look at the climate finance requirements in other sectors. Cooling is obviously the focus here. But in addition to that, we also need to look at some very specific technology-oriented solutions in terms of, you said, innovations in R&D, both thermal cooling as well as ACs, and somehow modifying the government programs so that they are oriented to addressing the cooling needs. So thank you very much. The two more speakers before we end this session here are Ms. Prima Madan and Shaurya Anand. So I'll request them to come up with their suggestions and briefs quickly.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Rashmi sir. I am Prima Madan. I work as a senior advocate on cooling and efficiency at NRDC. Pleasure to be here with such eminent panelists. One of the drawbacks of coming in last is that a lot of points have already been made, and thanks to Noah that he covered a lot of the points. But I wanted to talk a little more deeper. I think it is clear, what Mr. Ali Zaidi said in the beginning, that we cannot deploy yesterday's cooling to cool the future. So we got to think of innovation at a fast pace and deploy them fast enough. So I'm going to go a little deeper in terms of what are the opportunities of technological innovations within the two most important appliances, the room air conditioners and ceiling fans, and the importance of these two appliances has already been highlighted before. When we look at room air conditioners, there are three opportunities in terms of technological solutions, the perspective that we can look at from. And these three are looking at component level efficiency improvements, the compressor efficiency, the heat exchanger efficiency comes into play here. And the second opportunity within this appliance is that of an alternative strategies or technology integration, and we heard Hitachi talk about it as well. Then we need to go to the third aspect, and that's where you look at this more phase down last two bars, is on novel approaches towards air conditioning. So that's rethinking in terms of vapor compression cycle in room air conditioners, and maybe rethinking of a room air conditioner as a product itself. So this is the thinking that is evolving in the sector, research moving into these directions, to look at how feasible they are. A lot of these are already in a development phase, but needs to be brought to market, an example of which was also the 5X air conditioner that Noah spoke about earlier on. Potential measures for faster technology adoption. So again, we need ratcheting of minimum efficiency performance standards. A lot of countries have already put into place. There has also been work done at global level to develop model regulations for developing these minimum efficiency performance standards, largely to, move the industry and make these technologies commercially viable. There needs to be revision of test methods. Again, something that was highlighted in the context of the 5X air conditioners. Fostering R&D collaboration, something that Mr. Abbas also mentioned before. The bulk procurement programs. And the most important, especially in the context of India, is on emphasizing domestic manufacturing. India is going to see phenomenal growth of cooling, and air conditioner is going to be a large chunk of that cooling. So looking at solutions domestically and able to produce them domestically is going to be key for a country like India, both in terms of economics and availability of the equipment. And I wanted to cite an example over here that given the right conditions, there are examples of industry successfully leapfrogging the technology. And the case in point is here of a room air conditioner. In India, almost the entire market has now moved to a lower GWP, lower global warming potential refrigerant, R32, instead of its predecessor, which was much higher value, and an effort led by Daikin. So we see that happening. There are opportunities and examples of leapfrogging that are available. But finance is key when it comes to both development and deployment of technology. I'll quickly move to ceiling fans. Again, an equipment of extreme importance in India, fast-growing numbers. The number is likely to reach like 950 million units by 2037. That is what the estimates are suggesting. And when we look at the components of the fan, the chart on the right here kind of shows the scope of energy efficiency that the components of the fan offers. And 88% of the efficiency comes from the primary components, which consist of the motor and blades. Noah spoke about the brushless direct control motors earlier on. So that's the technology that is available now in the market. Not been adopted vastly, but there needs to be more effort towards its adoption. But there is more work that is going on in this direction. One of the barriers is the higher manufacturing cost when it comes to fan technologies. We see them evolving. This chart shows how the industry is moving from an AC induction fan to an improved fan to a super efficient and a more super efficient, with different components having different cost contributions. The fan market traditionally was a little conservative towards technology innovation, but now we see the innovation moving at a more proactive or a faster pace, so to say. And this chart kind of represents the technologies that are being researched and are going to be developed going forward. Coming to again, what is required to take the next step forward. As I mentioned before, financing is key here. We need these equipments have higher initial upfront costs. We need some incentives and subsidies to drive demand, awareness campaigns to inform the consumers, and again, I mentioned before, locally built components. I think is extremely critical to get these to market. And I wanted to highlight, and I'll conclude there, is that NRDC and partners are working on how we can, develop appliance technology roadmaps to set a long-term energy efficiency vision for these appliances mapped to the evolving technologies that are coming up. So this was a slight teaser, and we have in the next couple of months a roadmap that we will be releasing. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prima. It's indeed heartening to know that NRDC is working with its partners to come up with a technology roadmap and on a plan to bring these new technologies to market. Obviously, we need support of several stakeholders in this, including the government and the financing institutions. So let me now go to Shaurya Anand, who is my colleague in TERI, to give us his thoughts on sustainable innovations and sustainable technologies in the cooling sector.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today, as time is short, so I'm going to directly come to the points. So I think every speaker has very carefully and very beautifully told what sustainable cooling is. So I just wanted to highlight that the sustainable cooling is not merely the use of technology, but it is also the incorporation of practices. So you all know why these practices and why these technologies are important. The resource efficiency, direct and indirect emission reductions, and the thermal comfort is the center of it. So you know why cooling is important, because this year it was the warmest year, as you can say by the WMO reports. And this extreme weather climate events is going to increase, and the cooling is a very critical place because it covers multiple aspects like comfort, productivity, food security like vaccines, health, and energy efficiency. Now the very interesting part about the cooling is that it is like a paradox, because as the temperature is rising, extreme weather events are increasing day by day, so the people rely on more cooling devices. More cooling devices means more direct and indirect emissions. So a IEA predictive analysis told that by 2050, we have 3 times the current AC units, which is around 3 billion, which is a very, very large number. And the associated indirect carbon emissions will be much, much very high if this cooling paradox is not removed. The boundaries are becoming very less and less. So how we can look at the technological innovations in the cooling? So I will talk about the space cooling, is that the space cooling can be looked through the way of a temperature control, where we are going very good because the use of you can say, a very energy efficient compressors, which are variable compressor technologies. But on the other hand, there is another very interesting aspect, which is called the dehumidification. Presently, the dehumidification is happening simultaneously with the cooling. So what happens is that sometimes overcooling happens and a lot of wastage of energy is happening. So the other way is that a separate dehumidification technologies can be explored. I'm going to show one such technology is called solid desiccant cooling systems, which is basically what we are doing is that the researchers are trying to dehumidify the air separately so that in such a way that the energy demand is reduced. And another way of doing is that through the humidity responsive approach, which involves the use of hydrophobic barriers using the nano silica gel technology. And apart from that, there is also innovation happening in regard to refrigerant-free approach, which is the use of a salt-based solution. It not only eliminates the use of refrigerant, but it also helps in the tri-generation technologies. So finally, why cooling is a multi-phase challenge? There are 3 important headers, which are called technology, procurement, and usage. On the technology side, there are some bright sides. You can say that the use of a 3-star AC has been increased very high, and the use of R32 and R134 are a major refrigerant now. But on the other side, the challenges are that you can say there is an absence of a sensor, like a leak detection sensor, which can detect if how much refrigerant is leaking in the system. And the second is that use of IoT is still evolving. And apart from that, the new technology is dehumidification, because it will be very cost intensive. Now the second part is that the procurement. Procurement of, we can say that the eco-refrigerant refrigerants procurement has been increased very good, because TERI has also conducted a study, as our speaker highlighted. So in that study, we managed to incorporate the eco-friendly refrigerant in the procurement cycle. And the good servicing practices and the e-penetration has increased in India through the government e-market portal. But the challenges remain the same, that the life cycle considerations are not included into the procurements. The cost barriers are very high. Green procurement, that is the use of very high efficiency, super efficient air conditioning, is still a challenge. The last part is the very, very important. This is the usage, where the customer and users are at the center, which are usually very neglected in any events. So I like to highlight that the labeling star and labeling program has brought some positive impacts. Customers are now taking this star labels on their devices very seriously, and they are enjoying also it. You can say the result is that in India, 77% Indian customer buy 3-star ACs in the recent report. So it is a very promising sign. But the challenge still remains the behavioral aspect, how customer buys. Sometimes customer don't know the 1 5-tonnage AC is required or 2-tonnage AC is required for their room. So this is a very good, very interesting point. Another is that the temperature settings, how AC can also be used along with the ceiling fans at higher temperatures. and the servicing aspect, why the certified technicians are very important, and the TERI has also conducted a report on it. Finally, I'd like to highlight the one small thing. We at the TERI are also doing a behavior change initiatives where we are planning to address all the consumers, users, farmers, everyone through our industry engagement, through policymaker engagement, and through coalition, where we support all the coalitions in the making more aware and taking very wise decisions so that the sustainable cooling is truly achieved, not through just the technology, because in the end, consumers are users. So I will like to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaurya. I must appreciate Shaurya's point that apart from the changes in technologies to which he has referred in terms of cooling, dehumidification technologies, space cooling, refrigerant-free approaches, one of the major determinants of the progress of better equipment and adoption is the consumer behavior. So how we need to influence the consumers and then affect their social and economic the factors and make them aware and enhance their capacity in adopting the better equipment. So with this, let me thank all the panelists. We have come to the end of this session, but I must compliment them for enriching our knowledge. And we still have about 5 minutes left. We have some time for questions. I don't know. We have to close it. I would have loved to give you some time for questions. But the organizers tell me that I think we have to wind it up now. So thank you. Let me thank all the panelists once again for enhancing our knowledge. And hopefully this will be some of the lessons that we have learned today will be pointers for our further work on this area. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Mr. Rashmi and all our speakers for joining us today. Our last speaker for this event is Mr. Masatsugu Yoshioka, who is the Executive Director at NIDO. I now welcome Mr. Yoshioka to deliver the closing remarks for the session.
Thank you very much. Thank you for participating in this session this time. I am Yoshioka Masatsugu, Executive Director of NEDO. I'd like to deliver my sincere gratitude to all the participants today, including the panel discussion speakers and the panelists. As you know, this session was, of course, held by NEDO, but you may not know about NEDO. So in this occasion, using this time, I would like to speak about the introduction of NEDO a little bit. Anyway, maybe some know that what a NEDO is, but most of the people don't know what is NEDO is. NEDO is, of course, a Japanese agency, and it was established in 1980 after heavy grievance and second 2 times oil shocks. Now it becomes very large funding agency in Japan. NEDO focuses on R&D and technology and innovation. We are integrating players like private companies, academias, startups, and venture capitals. NEDO's budget is $1 billion. This capacity is now being greatly pumped up these days. Now NEDO was assigned to manage many funds. It amounts up to $45 billion. And NEDO is doing 100 projects underway, about 1,000 companies and 500 universities participating in these projects. As for international projects, since 1990, we did 100 projects. Still 30 projects are going on. Now NEDO is managing $18 billion in Green Innovation Funds project. Let me introduce some projects. Let me explain firstly the background. In October 2020, Japanese government declared carbon neutral society by 2050. December 2020, METI formulated the green growth strategy, and also METI obtained $18 billion, and METI assigned NEDO as the manager of this fund. Since then, we are managing this fund, and it's now doing 20 projects. Finally, I'd like to talk about ISEF because we are making lots of effort in this forum. ISEF is an international conference to promote innovation in energy and the environmental fields. It was organized by NEDO and METI in 2014. This year, ISEF was held as part of Tokyo Green Transformation Week. Around 1,700 people from 79 countries or regions came. 21 sessions were held. A new ISEF roadmap on AI for climate change mitigation was presented by Mr. Sandalow early today. Next year, it will be held in early October. Please join us again. Thank you very much for giving me an occasion to speak about NEDO, and please remember NEDO and ISEF from now on. Thank you again.